Temperature -40 degrees, wind speed 200 miles per hour. Extreme thermal depletion and severe hypoxia define the basic workspace of an aerial gunner. Crews anticipated violent deaths from exploding anti-aircraft shells. Reality delivered a much quieter end. A severed oxygen hose caused instant physiological shutdown. The affected airman simply lost consciousness. Without immediate intervention, he died quietly in his harness. The steady hiss of the oxygen regulator inside the rubber mask provided the only audible proof of life. Boeing engineers constructed the heavy bomber fuselage without internal pressurization. The crew performed combat duties in a biological void. Standard operating altitude exceeded 10,600 meters. The peak of Mount Everest sits lower at 8,848 meters. At 10 kilometers above sea level, atmospheric pressure drops critically. A human brain retains useful consciousness for roughly 60 seconds without artificial oxygen supply. The waist gunner monitored the open side window. A feed malfunction jams his .50 caliber weapon. The bolt mechanism locks tight. He pulls the charging handle. Nothing moves. He detaches his electrically heated leather glove to clear the extraction port. Bare skin contacts sub-zero weapon steel. Moisture bonds the flesh to the metal. Frostbite destroys the cellular tissue in seconds. The extreme cold dictated every physical action. If a shell fragment punctured a crewman, the blood froze solid almost immediately upon exiting the wound. Command provisioned each man with a single chocolate bar for a long-range flight. Nutrition held no tactical value. Survival depended on scanning sectors and maintaining equipment. When interceptor cannons shredded the wing spars, the aircraft lost structural integrity. The bomber entered an uncontrollable flat spin. Centrifugal forces pinned the airmen against the aluminum bulkheads. Escaping a burning fuselage demanded peak physical exertion. Statistics confirm the lethality of a doomed aircraft. Only 25% of crew members managed to reach the escape hatches and deploy their parachutes. Out of a standard 10-man crew, at least 7 men typically rode the wreckage to the ground. Those who escaped faced a slow descent through the freezing troposphere. Their heated flight suits lost all thermal properties after disconnecting from the onboard electrical circuits. Enemy interceptor squadrons frequently ignored the informal rules of aerial combat. German fighter pilots regularly expended their remaining machine gun ammunition on descending parachutists. How many airmen failed to return? 52,000 died in combat and 8,000 at training bases. Those surviving hypoxia simply populated the demographic statistics of tactical losses. 8,000 men died exclusively during flight training. By 1944, the United States 8th Air Force exceeded 350,000 personnel. 3 out of 4 crewmen became casualties while dropping 1.5 million tons of bombs. The United States initiated this campaign after entering the war. 13 heavy machine guns defended the airframe. Yet ammunition allocations provided each weapon with merely 60 seconds of continuous operational fire. 52,000 combat fatalities resulted from engagements defined by these strict limits. Fire control dictated survival. The tail gunner tracked the interceptor. He fired a short burst. His eyes immediately checked the remaining feed belt links. A standard Browning M250 caliber machine gun fired 750 to 850 rounds per minute. The acrid smell of burnt gunpowder filled the unpressurized fuselage. Every crew member faced a rigid logistical ceiling. Engineers restricted individual ammunition supplies to exactly 500 rounds due to critical aircraft weight limits. One cartridge weighed over 110 grams. Heavy ammunition loads compromised maximum altitude. Gunners could not sustain suppressive fire. They required precise burst control. Lateral tracking generated high error margins. Waist gunners, firing from the sides, encountered extreme deflection angles. The tail position offered the most stable platform against rear approaches. Luftwaffe analysts recognized this defensive pattern. Interceptor squadrons altered their approach vectors. German pilots initiated head-on attacks. Interceptors targeted the nose section directly. Closing speeds during frontal assaults exceeded 800 kilometers per hour. Enemy fighters concentrated their fire on the cockpit glass, knowing that destroying the flight controls neutralized the bomber. The defensive perimeter required an immediate mechanical upgrade. Later production blocks integrated a motorized chin turret. It housed twin 50-caliber machine guns facing directly forward. Army Air Corps engineers drafted the blueprint. The new machine had to break through to targets without fighter escorts. Development started in the early 1930s. Planners wanted a high-altitude strategic platform. The aircraft had to reach distant industrial centers. Pursuit planes lacked the required fuel range. The heavy bomber had to fly alone. Designers installed 13 50-caliber machine guns. Steel barrels pointed in every direction. The layout created overlapping fire zones. Dozens of bombers held tight combat formations. Guns covered the blind spots of neighbors. Aviation physics demanded a strict compromise. More turrets meant more dead weight. Armor plates added structural mass. Engineers sacrificed the primary strike payload. A British Lancaster carried 6,300 kilograms. That was pure offensive payload. The American counterpart carried much less. For long missions, it took 2,000 kilograms of explosive ordnance. The remaining lift capacity went to survival. Ammunition boxes, steel bulkheads, turret motors, ballistic glass. The resulting bomber proved durable. The airframe sustained heavy kinetic damage. Engines burned, wings shattered, controls failed. Crews fought inside a flying steel bunker. Then the concept met reality over Europe. Daylight raids faced German interceptors. Gunners exhausted their ammunition belts. Combat boxes broke apart. Crippled machines crawled back across the English Channel and rolled onto concrete airfields with entire fuselage sections torn away. One aircraft lifts off the runway. The second is already halfway through its takeoff roll right behind it. For the defensive concept to function, pilots held a distance of mere meters for hours. Commanders implemented the combat box configuration. Bombers grouped into tight three-ship elements. Gunners synchronized their overlapping firing arcs. The margin was zero. A standard B-17 possessed a wingspan of 31.6 meters. Packing these dimensions into dense airspace required constant throttle adjustments. Maintaining this geometry demanded continuous physical input. The pilot gripped the control yoke with both hands. Flight controls lacked hydraulic assist. He corrected the heading blindly through European cloud cover. He manipulated the rudder constantly. This prevented striking the adjacent B-17 flying 3 meters away. The continuous vibration of 4 Wright Cyclone radial engines traveled straight through the seat structure, transferring mechanical stress directly into the pilot's body. These mission profiles lasted up to 8 hours. Fatigue degraded reaction times before combat even started. Autopilot hardware remained disengaged. Proximity generated secondary operational hazards. Mid-air collisions caused severe losses outside of enemy engagement zones. Friendly fire presented another documented risk. The defensive 50-caliber guns featured a specific mechanical interrupter. This cam mechanism stopped the firing sequence when barrels swept across the bomber's own tail. It could not detect the neighboring aircraft occupying the exact same trajectory. Tracers routinely penetrated adjacent units during defensive crossfire. Control cables snapped. A crippled machine fell out of the formation. British crews flew in darkness. They changed tactics early on. Night raids offered crude survival. British targets lacked focus. American headquarters demanded daylight precision. Bombers died first. Stragglers fed a flawed doctrine. Losses spiked. Commanders launched missions in 1942. They trusted a mechanical computer. The Norden bomb sight promised perfection. Gyroscopes stabilized the crosshairs. Calculations required straight flight paths. Specifications demanded a 30-meter target circle. Drops occurred from 6 kilometers altitude. Planners expected surgical industrial damage. They visualized broken German factories. Reality proved different. Flak tore through dense boxes. Shrapnel destroyed critical flight surfaces. Engines failed. Machine gun turrets jammed. Dozens of aircraft burned daily. Missions proceeded despite the data. Command ignored the physical attrition. They pushed the doctrine forward. Headquarters drafted new target lists. More bombers joined the grid. Casualties mounted with every sortie. The strategy remained unchanged. It failed. German command noticed predictable patterns. They analyzed the American formations. Defense networks adapted. Luftwaffe officers relocated their assets. Berlin initiated rapid fighter redeployments. The airspace saturated. Target coordinates shifted. The aerial threat multiplied. Crews braced for impact. No one retreated. Radar detected new incoming targets. Elite fighter squadrons transferred directly from the Eastern Front began appearing on Allied radar screens. 20 millimeters and 30 millimeters. The new autocannon calibers punched straight through bomber fuselages. Relocated fighter squadrons formed only half the threat. Ground artillery provided the rest. German defenses relied on a highly synchronized anti-aircraft network. Ground stations tracked incoming American formations. Radar units determined altitude and approach vectors. Mechanical fire control computers processed the radar data in real time. The operators transmitted firing coordinates to multiple batteries simultaneously. The heavy 88mm gun fired its volley. A standard German anti-aircraft shell weighed about 9 kilograms. It carried a timer fuse set for a specific detonation altitude. The shell burst exactly at the designated height near the aircraft's thin aluminum skin. Deafening cracks of exploding flak vibrated through the airframe. Hot shrapnel clattered against the metal fuselage. Splinters severed control cables and struck the crew members inside. A direct hit snapped a heavy bomber in half instantly. Forming a tight combat box offered protection against interceptors. Against ground fire, a dense formation presented a massive, unmissable target. During the final bombing run, the pilot engaged an early form of mechanical autopilot. The bomb site required a perfectly straight and level flight path to drop the payload. The crew had to maintain this rigid trajectory for several minutes to guarantee accuracy. But survival inside an artillery barrage required immediate and sharp evasive maneuvers. The aircraft flew straight. The pilots could only watch the black puffs of smoke appearing ahead. Evasion was impossible. Every black cloud meant another 9-kilogram shell detonating and scattering hundreds of steel fragments. The bombers pushed directly through the blast zones. There was no technical countermeasure against this type of ground defense. Major industrial sites in the Ruhr Valley possessed massive defense rings. The priority targets were surrounded by hundreds of heavy anti-aircraft guns. The batteries fired continuously until the bombers cleared the airspace. 3,000 shells. Why did the escort leave formations? Fighters reached fuel limits. They turned back to England. In the summer of 1943, Operation Point Blank tested the daylight doctrine. Heavy bombers struck industrial targets deep inland. P-47 Thunderbolts provided cover. Spitfires flew the flanks. Range was limited. Bombers flew much deeper. Escort fuel gauges dropped. Fighters banked west. The bombers entered a spatial trap. Completely alone, German interceptors waited. Focke-Wulf 190s climbed fast. Their maximum speed exceeded 650 kilometers per hour. Messerschmitt Bf-109s joined the hunt. The Focke-Wulf carried 4 20mm cannons. Speed and firepower. Bombers fell. Thousands of crewmen died. Engineers would eventually solve the fuel problem later. But current missions continued without tactical changes. German radar stations precisely monitored the airspace, instantly registering the exact coordinates where the Allied escorts reversed course. The experimental YB-40 gunship carried maximum machine guns to protect the group, but the armor weight caused it to lag behind the formation. The heavy escort became a target itself. While German radar operators tracked the retreating fighters, engineers at British bases searched for ways to extend flight range. The modified YB-40 carried over 11,000 rounds of ammunition. This load critically reduced its airspeed. Once standard bombers dropped their payload, the gunship could not keep up. the defensive concept failed. By late 1943, drop tanks provided a solution. Mechanics secured aluminum containers under the wings of the P-47 Thunderbolt. The pilot exhausted the auxiliary fuel first and pulled the release lever before the dogfight. A sharp metallic clank signaled the detachment of the empty tank under the wing. The fighter regained maneuverability. The P-47 weighed over 4,500 kilograms empty. The external tanks added 100 miles to its combat radius. It burned too much fuel. The twin-engine P-38 Lightning entered the European theater next, extending the escort perimeter. Yet a definitive solution required a lighter aerodynamic design. Maintenance crews prepared the hangars. Hundreds of P-51 Mustangs rolled onto the concrete runways at English airfields. Hundreds of heavy bombers proceed toward the capital. Their primary objective involves not releasing payloads, but provoking the Luftwaffe into a massive scramble. By early 1944, the introduction of drop tank-equipped fighters altered the tactical function of the bomber fleets. During the March 1944 operation targeting Berlin, the 8th Air Force deployed over 700 heavy bombers. These formations operated explicitly as aerial bait. The capital sits 600 miles from English air bases, guaranteeing an extensive intercept window. German commands scrambled all available interceptor squadrons to defend the airspace. The structural modifications implemented on the defending aircraft now became a severe disadvantage. Engineers had installed large-caliber cannons and armor plates to maximize damage against unescorted targets. This added weight degraded aerodynamic efficiency and reduced maximum airspeed. When they engaged the incoming fleets, they encountered advanced escorts instead of unprotected formations. The modified German interceptors lacked the maneuverability required for a sustained dogfight. The tactical shift initiated a steady degradation of German fighter capabilities. Over the subsequent 90 days, the Luftwaffe lost 90% of its experienced aces and active pilots. This attrition rate ended their capacity to maintain defensive perimeters. The command achieved the desired outcome through a calculated exchange of personnel. Thousands of aircrews simply never returned.